everybody, greetings once again. It is I, Ole Gamer Joe, here with Media Moogle with another Media Moogle review. Today taking a look at Ion Fury, a high-octane first-person shooter from Void Point and published by 3D Realms and 1C Entertainment. It is very much an old-school first-person shooter that pays great respect to the classic Duke Nukem 3D in terms of its character's attitude and the overall look and feel of the game. It's worth noting that this game is actually a prequel to a game that was previously released called Bombshell, which I was not super familiar with myself. My very loose understanding of that title is that it wasn't particularly well received, but I don't think they're going to have that problem here with Ion Fury, which is an excellent first-person shooter that is now available on the Nintendo Switch, the Xbox One, and the PS4 for the first time, as it had previously been released on Steam back in 2019. In Ion Fury, you will take control of Shelly Bombshell Harrison, who is all but in looks and gender the clone of Duke Nukem. If you had a female version of Duke Nukem, this is exactly what it would be. An evil doctor named Jadus Heskel has unleashed hell on the city of Neo DC, and of course, Bombshell, being the awesome badass global defense soldier that she is, wants to claim the city again from the clutches of evil. Mechanically, this game feels really fast and frantic right out of the gate. This is not a game where you're going to just kind of stand around and time your shots. You're not going to be crouched in corners, picking off foes from a distance too often. This is the kind of high-energy gameplay that I love in a first-person shooter. It is not slow and methodical in any way whatsoever, and I really did like this approach. It definitely reminded me of old-school games like Duke Nukem, of course, but also Blood. And the developer also mentions Shadow Warrior as an inspiration. You'll definitely feel all of that. If you're familiar with that era of first-person shooter games, then you're going to feel right at home here. Yet Ion Fury doesn't feel like some kind of unplayable relic either. I found that the controls were really snappy. The Nintendo Switch version, which is where we played it, felt good for the most part, with only a few frame hiccups when there were larger explosions here and there. The game's pretty good in terms of how you can customize it. I did mess around with the sensitivity a little bit here and there to try to get a feel for what I thought was the most comfortable, but I did eventually settle on the default settings that worked out pretty well for the majority of the game. Aim assist is also on by default, and I recommend keeping it that way unless you are an absolute pro at these kinds of games. No, there's no aiming down the sights in Ion Fury. This is pure run and gun first-person action. You'll also have plenty of platforming throughout the game, which mostly felt good to me, and there's plenty of key collecting as well, unlocking different doors with card keys, big explosions with a bunch of different weapons, including some cool grenades that can be used against your enemies, as well as a bunch of different guns with a wide range of uses that includes grenade launchers, close-range shotguns, and of course pistols from a distance. It all feels mechanically really good, and I had an absolute blast running through the levels, mowing down enemies, sometimes a little bit of strategy, peeking around corners for example, but for the most part just trying to mow them down. The city that this game takes place in is huge, and Ion Fury will take a lot of your time. I would estimate around 12 to 15 hours to complete for the average player, and that's not even including the secrets, which there are a ton of throughout these levels. You also have some secret levels that can be explored, so there is a lot of content in this game. So whether you're experimenting with all the different weapon types or you're just exploring these large areas, and yes, there is no procedural generation in this game, which I definitely was a fan of, Ion Fury rarely lets off the acceleration and keeps things moving at a very rapid pace. Graphically, this game also tries to model itself after the games that inspire it, and of course it looks absolutely fantastic just out of that era. Beautifully handcrafted textures throughout with wonderful set pieces, big explosions, fun enemy designs, some of which will get on your nerves a little bit, but hey, that's the way these games go, and a really likable character that offers plenty of fantastically funny one-liners. At least I thought they were. There is the option to turn Bombshell's voice off, but come on, you don't really want to do that, do you? Outside of those cheesy one-liners, which I quite enjoyed, I also really did like this soundtrack. There's great musical compositions here with lots of synth. Who doesn't love synth in 90s games? And all of the sound effects have that nice crunch that you would expect just out of that era. Great job in terms of graphical presentation as well as sound design. One thing that perhaps could be viewed as a little bit disappointing in Ion Fury is the fact that this console version, at least the Nintendo Switch version that I played, did not have any sort of level editor that I saw, so you won't be able to mess around with those tools, which I understand were in the Steam version. That could potentially be a big turnoff for folks that like the original release. I myself am not a big level editor guy, so I didn't particularly mind, but I know a lot of you folks out there might be into that type of stuff, and if you are, well, it's not here. In a world full of Call of Duties and Fortnites and games that don't really speak to my personal taste, I was absolutely in love with Ion Fury. This was a great throwback to the 90s era of first-person shooter. It is a long and difficult shooter, and I don't think it will be for everyone, particularly people that grew up in the more modern age of first-person shooters, but for those of us that really did like this era of 90s first-person shooting action, then Ion Fury does it better than perhaps any game in recent memory. Just as your lead character shouts out in the beginning of this game, "Bring it on," I say bring us more Ion Fury because I'm not ready to be done with this franchise yet. For more on Ion Fury and all of our other content, head on over to MediaMoogle.net where we have some great podcasts like I Dream of Indie for you to check out, and if you have enjoyed our video coverage today, please do consider hitting the subscribe button below. If you really like us, you can head on over to patreon.com/MediaMoogle where we have 3 wonderful tiers to choose from, or you can feel free to leave a donation in the description box below. Thank you so much, however you end up supporting Media Moogle.